Welcome everyone. I want to thank you for your time. My name's Safi Obadilla and I'm the Director for Sales Engineering here at Citrix. This is actually the fourth event in a roadshow that we're doing around Australia and New Zealand to share with you, our customers and partners, the latest updates from Citrix as a company, as well as the insights into a recent survey we conducted around Australian organisations. We've structured today in two parts. One, we've got a keynote where we'll share insights into that survey, and we'll hear from Tim Dillon from Tech Research Asia, who we partnered with to conduct that survey. We'll also hear from PJ Hock, our Chief Product Officer, and we're very fortunate to be joined by PJ all the way over from the US. PJ leads our technical strategy for Citrix as a company. He'll be sharing our vision and strategy for Citrix as a company. And then after that, Simon Fennon, a network and security specialist, and I will be sharing with you a summary of the latest announcements and how Citrix is helping you power the future of work. So we'll aim to close off by around 11:15 with some Q&A as well. But firstly, I do want to thank HP, our sponsor. They have a booth here. They've got a range of thin clients available there, so if you are looking to refresh your thin clients or looking at a new project that requires the use of thin clients, I definitely recommend you have a look at those. I think they've got one of the few thin clients on the market that actually look good. I'd even go far as calling them sexy. Where's Andrew and Camille? There you guys are. But just some housekeeping stuff. If I could ask you to keep your mobiles on silent. In the event of a fire, the fire exits are where the green men are marked. And if you do need to use the facilities, they're downstairs and on the left. Each of you will have an eval form on your desk in front of you. The eval form we've actually structured on the topics that we're going to cover throughout the day. So I actually encourage you to start filling that out as the session proceeds. And so with that, I'm just going to play a short introduction message from our CEO, David Henschel.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm David Henschel, President and CEO of Citrix. The world around us is moving at lightning speed, and the technologies we've only previously dreamed about are moving into production and into the enterprise. Without question, the current pace of innovation is astounding, and we're here to harness the technologies to increase the productivity of your employees, your most valuable asset. We want to power the future of work by delivering the experience that business and employees demand, the choice and flexibility you need, and the means of enabling security across all of it. Citrix has always pushed the limits of the possible, and today is no exception. In my 15 years at the company, I've never seen our teams more focused on our customers and your outcomes and our promise to help you unlock innovation and growth within your own businesses. At Citrix Synergy 2018, we talked about how we're delivering on that promise by unveiling a next-generation user experience that's going to delight your employees and become the preferred way to work. This unified, secure, and contextual Citrix Workspace will meet the needs of where you are today and confidently scale into the future. We shared our vision for enabling choice across any cloud and any device. And most importantly, we shared with you how we want to meet the security demands of the future with Citrix Analytics and our secure digital perimeter. I'm excited for you to see how Citrix can prepare you for whatever comes next by enabling you to test your limits, build confidence in your digital transformation, and define your own future of work. Thank you for your commitment to Citrix, and thank you for joining us at this event. Have a great time.
So I've been at Citrix just over 8 years, but my journey with Citrix started about 20 years ago. I was in my first job out of uni, and I was working for an IT training company. And to give you an idea on how long ago that was, the training courses we used to run were on things like WordPerfect, Lotus 123, and CorelDRAW. And I think looking out there, I think there's some people there that do remember those software packages. We did start doing training courses in Word and Excel, but that came a bit later. But one of my jobs was looking after the training rooms. So we had 7 training rooms. Each training room had about 10 to 12 PCs in it. So every evening, my job was to make sure that those PCs had the right software on them for the next day's training. And you'd think, that's not a big deal. You can just install all the software that you needed on each PC. But back then, the PCs were pretty small. I mean, we're talking about the days when the CPUs were 386s and 486s, and the hard drives were not in gigabytes, they were megabytes. So they were very small. So every evening, my routine would begin. Racing around through every PC, uninstalling software, installing new software. And after a while, I pretty much memorized the task sequence I needed to click. It was pretty boring work, but that's what I had to do. But about 12 months into that job, I heard about this company called Citrix. And they had come up with a new way of delivering applications. Instead of having to install those applications on the end device, you install those applications centrally, and you only had to do it once, and then those applications were accessible to all the devices. And that's it, that's the solution, to stop me having to do that nightly routine of running around to 70-odd PCs. And so I started sort of building a proposal, and unfortunately, my manager at the time didn't go for it. I think I was a cheaper resource to do all that work than investing some money, but I was hooked. And about 6 months later, I joined a Citrix partner, and 20 years later, here I am now. And I have to say, I'm more excited than I've ever been about the direction of where Citrix is going as a company. And the same way we've changed and evolved from those early days of focusing on Windows applications and desktops to a much more broader portfolio of capability, I think the workplaces that you all come from have changed as well. I'm sure some of you remember these days when the office looked like this. Cubicles and computers, right? Not very flexible. There's no working from home or remote access or anything like that. If you wanted to work from home, you'd have to print everything out, make your notes, and come back and re-enter that into the computer. The phone was just used to make phone calls, and that was it. Not a very flexible environment, not a very an environment conducive to collaboration. I'm sure you'll agree that the workplace has changed. Australia is actually one of the leading countries when it comes to the use of activity-based working. And it's not just the environment that's changed, it's the demands on IT. Employees want to work on different devices from different locations. The portfolio of applications has changed from where it was before around mainframe apps and Windows apps to a much more diverse range, including SaaS, web, and mobile apps as well. But keep in mind, those Windows apps and mainframe apps are still kicking around, and they're probably going to be with us for a while. But the people have changed as well. There's new generations of workers coming into the workforce, all with different demands and different expectations of IT. So to get a better understanding of what was happening in the Australian marketplace, in Australian organisations, we partnered with a company called Tech Research Asia. They conducted a survey of over 1,000 people from different industries, different genders, and different roles, really to get a sense of what was happening in the workplaces of Australia. How were they dealing with change, with the different generations that were there, with demands for workplace flexibility, with demands for new types of technology, and what they saw as the impact of emerging technology like AI and machine learning. And so to give you more insights into what we found from that survey, I'd like to invite up Tim Dillon on the stage from TRA. Tim.
Second. Thanks, man. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I came in from Sydney last night, so I didn't necessarily have an early start, but I'm sure some of you did. Now, typically I'm not a morning person, so I'm about to do to you what I hate having done to me when I'm in the audience at these sort of things. Please bear with me. Could you all stand up? I'm a short, fat man. This is my exercise for the day, watching you people do this. Right. Thank you very much. Just humour me and bear with me. I would like you to think about your work and the people you work with. So not the totality of your organisations, but the people you work with every week, you might email, you talk to, you might argue, you plan, or whatever it is that you do to collaborate and be productive. Now, sit down if you've met 100% of those people face to face. If you know everyone face to face that you've worked with, take a seat. One. It's exhausting standing, sir. I hate it. How about 3/4, 75%? All right. We've still got about half. All right, let's go with half. If you know half of the people face to face, take a seat. How about 1/4? Yeah. I'd like to congratulate the few of you still standing on your fantastic aerobic endurance. My point about this, and we did this in Sydney on Tuesday, and we had about between 10 or 15% of the people in the room had never met anybody else that they worked with face to face. Now this is where I'm going today. Because if you think about that, these are people, as are you, that might know 1/4 or 1/2. Yet you are still productive, you are still collaborating, you are still arguing, you are still exchanging ideas or ignoring people or whatever it is you want to do and be productive in your organizations. And that's the whole point about how we work. Everything is changing. And this is not a slide about digital transformation. I'm an industry analyst, and if I hear it too much more, I'm going to start crying at night. This is not about transformation. Your industries are already changing. The business models are changing. It's not if they'll change, it's a when. And in some cases, they have. And from the research we've done, it sort of narrows down to around 3 key areas. Now, the first of those is what, for want of a better phrase, rapid digitization. Everything is going digital, and digitization is creating data. Data is the fuel, the absolute fuel that goes into the applications that support our outcomes and what we are doing from a work environment. That's the first one we see. The second is what we're terming innovation technologies. And several years from now, they won't be regarded as innovative, but for the time being, they are. And these are things, to a certain extent, IoT, well established, big data and analytics, yes, AI, machine learning, natural language programming, all of those sort of things. The reality technologies, excuse me. So these are all technologies that are actively being assessed in the Australian marketplace right now. You have companies, everybody I'm sure knows UE, the insurance company. 3 or 4 months ago, up pops the email in my email, strangely enough. And it basically said, Tim, we'd like to give you an offer of being a better driver, and we're going to embed the software on your phone. It'll use the accelerometers and the GPS and all those sort of good things to track your driving style. It will look at your speed, your locations, and we'll give you a discount on your premium, 10%. Oh, nice. All they're doing is telematics, which CGU and Norwich Union did in the UK in the early 2000s. But the point is that they're coming out and saying, we have something that will change your driving. It will also change your premium. It will probably change, in some cases, if it's widespread enough, maybe we all might be nicer drivers and slow down a bit, so state revenue might fall, and et cetera, et cetera. But it is an example of an organisation coming to me and going, here's an outcome for you which benefits both of us. If you look at what Norwich Union did, by the way, they saw, when they implemented this technology in the UK, it was close to a 30% reduction in claims. Now, that's a huge outcome for them in terms of a business as an insurer. You've got AI and machine learning is incredibly prevalent. We see this, and I'll talk to this a little bit later on. And then you've got organisations, for example, in the virtual reality space, in the mixed reality space. Samsung. Now, we associate VR typically with consumer technology. We're more familiar with it with the headset on and looking at something and people laughing at us around us because we're gesticulating and unaware of what we're doing. So it's grown up in consumer land. But actually, Samsung have done a clinical trial, a medical clinical trial, with cancer patients. And the conclusion is that 2 to 3 minutes of VR therapy is the equivalent to up to an hour's worth of pain release from opiate-based drug treatment post-chemo. How long before health service providers become content providers in that scenario and don't always dispense drugs? You know? So these are the sort of the changes that we're talking about. And fundamental to that, I suppose, is how we work. So there's a chart up there behind me. That chart shows you two sort of particular statistics. The first is we said to employees, and this is purely an employee perspective, by the way. We said to employees, what work styles does your organization offer you? First one. Second bar is, do you accept them? Well, the first observation you make about that, well, all this is offered, but not always accepted, and that's fine. The point about this slide is that we are a highly mature marketplace. As Safi said at the start, Australia has been one of the strongest adopters of flexible workplaces and flexible work styles. Sorry, I have this tape on here and I'm sticking to the floor, which is slightly disconcerting. And you can see that we offer remote working, it's flexible working, whatever it is. We're a small company. We have guys based across Tokyo, Singapore, Malaysia, and Australia. We all work from home. We don't work to set times. We work to whatever it is that we're doing. That's sort of what I'm talking about. This is a small, medium, large company change. And the importance of this is that 70% number up there, which is basically saying that we feel more productive, we feel more engaged, we're more loyal when we have this flexibility. And that's all great. It's valid. But then think about it in the context of this skill shortage. That there's been public commentary about the skill shortage in Australia for several years now. And then look at the second stat up there, which is 1 in 2 people will say, nope, don't want to work for you if you don't offer that flexible work style. Now you start to think about that aspect in terms of recruit and retain, and I'm not just talking about grads, by the way, it's all of us. So 1 in 2 people, and ask yourself that question, would you work for an organisation that doesn't have the flexibility in your work life? Thank you, sir, I appreciate you validating that theoretical question. Cheers. Because it is a common factor these days. And it's not just Gen Y or Gen Z or whichever generation comes after that, so that's where I'm going. It is all of us. We have become accustomed to having that. And some roles don't. Some roles you just won't fit that. You can't have a prison guard going, well, I'm off to work from the beach today. That doesn't work, I understand that. It's fitness for purpose. But you have to have it these days. You have to have it. Because it's, I guess, indicative of where we are. So we sort of said, well, where do you work? And you can see all up there. Now, where do you work and are you most productive and where do you want to work? Those are the two sort of questions. Now, the eagle-eyed ones of you that are quick readers are going to note the bottom line, which is from an enclosed cubicle office where I can close the door and focus on my job. That's fine. That is still a big part of how we work. What I would say to you is if we'd done this 15 years ago, that data point might well be 90% of us work from a closed office, or certainly a much higher number. I would also suggest to you that the productivity numbers would be much lower. But that's fine. Again, fitness for purpose. But there are other areas up there. Activity-based workspaces, for example, great example, Safi references. ABW, by the way, is not hot desks. ABW is not hot desking. It's not, I'll come in and work there today and work there tomorrow. That's hot desking. ABW, for those of you who aren't quite familiar with the concept, is, let me give you an example. I go back to my office tomorrow in Sydney, and if I had a big office and lots of people in our organisation, my workday would probably go something like this tomorrow. I'd sit down with our client services team and they'd go, did you mess up in Melbourne? Do we have to go and apologise? Followed by a discussion with the sales team going, have you got any orders? And then I'd have to go to the accounting people and say, do you know how much parking costs in Melbourne? And can you please approve my bill? And then I'll have to go and talk to HR because I've been swearing at the accountants because they're not going to pay it, right? So I've walked my workflow through an environment. That's what ABW is. ABW is where work flows with you. Now, the importance about ABW is things like utilization, office space utilization, for example, or productivity. So let me give you two examples. Sorry. People probably know Dexus, the big professional services and real estate firm. Dexus in Sydney have an ABW workspace. They have 80% capacity for all their employees at any one point in time, but they can easily fit up to 120% of their employees in the office at any one point in time. So they're saving themselves on real estate costs. That's great. Microsoft did the same thing, 4 floors in Sydney down to 1, and still can accommodate the same amount of workers. So there's a utilization and real estate aspect and facilities management, very important. But then you also have, and they're large organisations. Let's talk about a much smaller one. I can't tell you the name, but there is a medical device, global medical device manufacturing organisation. They have their headquarters in Sydney, but it's a relatively small headquarters, and it's about 55, 60 people of that size. They've recently undergone a massive SAP migration. So you can imagine the joyful feeling. Sorry, I shouldn't be unkind to the people at SAP, but they had to bring in for 7 months 23 additional resources into an ABW office that already was at around 70% of the capacity of the number of people that worked there. So they pretty much almost doubled their workforce increased by 50%. This is where analysts get their numbers wrong, by the way. Increased their workforce by 50% for 7 months in the same office space. 23 additional people, programmers, devs, consultants, Deloitte, expensive, so you want them working as much as you can. So it's this productivity output as well, and you shouldn't overlook that when you're thinking about these sort of things. We work from home, we work from cafes, wherever it's going to be. Good, that's great. And this is really important. Why is this important? Because of the collaborative aspect. We are very busy. You'll see some numbers up there, for example. So the first of those is, actually I've just forgotten, sorry. 50%, this is a very important point actually, 50% of people say, I want to work face to face. I want to be able to sit and talk to you. I want to be able to engage with you, sir. But we're not, because either some of these other things are going on where we waste some time, or in between 30 and 50% of my normal day, I'm not at my allocated desk anyway. So you have to take the tools and you have to collaborate better. If you're not driving collaboration with tools because of these scenarios, then you are not achieving what you need to do for your customers. It's a really simple point. So we have that. And I guess the other aspect to the collaboration is tools. Now I don't want to go back to the old discussions that I'm sure many of us have heard about, bring your own device. BYOD is an established technology strategy for many organisations. 52% of people tell us that they bring their own smartphone to work. More importantly, and the numbers aren't up there, but 80% of the people that we surveyed said, actually, if I use my own kit, I'm more comfortable with the user experience on that device. That's a big issue. You don't want two-factor authentication where essentially your phone becomes a frisbee in frustration as you hurl it across the room. So user experience, are more productive, are more engaged, and actually people of their own devices tend to look after them a little bit better than what they do with their work kit. So there are all these factors around bring your own device, which is not only BYOD, although frankly if this thing stays up here for much longer, I quite like this, I might be take your own device in a minute, but it's BYOA, bring your own apps. 1 in 2 are saying, on my work phone that I will use my own apps. I either buy them or they're free, but I'm going to use those to do my job. Now, it's an easy thing to do to point to Facebook and say there's an app on your phone and there's all this unauthorized access to it. That's a very obvious example to use. Or My Health Record, for example, if it's on your phone and all these third parties were going to have access to it. You don't know, in some cases, what is accessing your data and your applications on that device through a personal app. That is very important particularly so in an area of data breach. If you look at the latest OAIC numbers, 5 months worth of reporting, 305 breaches, so that's 2.5 a day. Breaches reported. 40% of those breaches have come from employees. Now, it's either me making a mistake and using my OneDrive or cloud-based storage and sending my strat plan instead of the cute cat video to a friend, or it's me going, I'm stealing the strat plan and keeping it for myself and sending it to my competitor. It's malicious activity. It's a mistake by an employee or it's malicious. But that's 40% of just the reported breaches. That's quite significant. Then if you think about anybody that sort of thinks GDPR in the EU isn't important, if you have a single European customer transaction anywhere in your organization, it's suddenly very important for you. The odds of it impacting you here are remote, yes. But that is an extremely, extremely tight data regime under which you must work. And if you think it's not happening in the rest of Asia, India is looking at data privacy laws, New Zealand's data privacy laws are ahead of Australia's, Singapore's doing some stuff, Hong Kong is even doing some stuff, Malaysia is doing some stuff, Korea's done some stuff, Japan's done, et cetera, et cetera. The point about the security environment is that the regulatory environment now is much, much tighter and much trickier. So we have bring your own device, bring your own apps, bring your own cloud, and we work better with those. There are upsides, there are positives to this, but we need to be very cognizant of what we have to do from a compliance, governance, security, et cetera, and the user experience within that is you cannot overestimate how important that is. It's a fundamental part of the entire experience. So that's a bit of the now. Let's look at the next. I'm going to show you this. I love this. This shows you a picture from my local newspaper 2 years ago. It's grade 4 children doing a virtual reality walk on the moon. Now, anybody that's used VR knows that the headset experience is a one-to thing. It's me looking at something. What do you immediately notice about this picture? The little girl grabbing her friend and pointing. This is a many to one. Now, my point about this slide is 8 to 15 years from now, these children will be in our workforce. This is teaching them from a very, very, very early age to use technology to share and collaborate. And it's not a desktop, this is a virtual reality environment. Now, I'm going to go past Safi and say my first device was an 8086 machine when I was doing university assignments on it. Given the amount of plagiarism and theft at University of Tasmania amongst my fellow students, I wasn't sharing that with anyone. My point is these kids are growing up learning to share at school very early on. If you're not preparing for this now in 8 to 15 years, when they come into your workplace, it's going to be an interesting time when they arrive. So, just bear that in mind. We have a multi-generational workforce. CSIROs say that the current workplace is roughly 40% Gen X, 20% Gen Y. 20 years from now, Gen X, baby boomers, we're not there. It's pretty much 40% Gen Y, 40% Gen Z. Think about the implications now. Please, not leave it for 10 years from now, sort of thing. And the interesting thing is, we have the tech. I feel like the $6 million man, we have the technology, but we do. We said to people, what do you need to work to be more productive? And the top one is nothing. I'm good. I've got all the stuff I need. Actually, what I want is number 2, which is better connectivity. I want better network connectivity. I want better applications performance. I want better collaboration capabilities. I want better connectivity in my work environment. Let me have it seamlessly available when I need it available. Now, that's the now. You can't ignore the now, but then you've got to keep an eye on innovation for the next, because the third point up there is about data analysis and visualization. And just again, to pick an example around virtual reality, there is a huge amount of effort in Australia and elsewhere going into virtual reality visualization of data sets. Monash here, UNSW in Sydney have incredibly clever people on some amazing commercialized programs to visualize data to enable me to view and understand it better. The Garvan Institute, Medical Institute here in Australia, has partnered with the Wiseman Institute, I think it is, to undertake cancer research. Massive data sets on cancer treatments. Essentially, I can walk into the cancer cell and visualize that and construct potential treatments. So you have to have the now right, get that sorted, but make sure you're keeping an eye on the next, if you like. So, who's sick of hearing about AI and machine learning and everything else, and robots are going to kill us all and take our jobs at the same time? There is a certain degree of fatigue already about this discussion around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and related areas of NLP, natural language program. Don't ignore it. We're very complacent. If you look at that bottom thing, I'm not worried, my job is too damn difficult to give to a machine. The most recent research suggests that if there is a degree of automation in your role, whatever that automation is, and I love this bit, you have to think for a second or so about what it is you're doing, there is a 55% chance that role will go to something that isn't human. This is professional services as well as blue collar. Law firms are already creating AI briefs. There's tax bots out there that the ATO have approved and integrated into their platform for SMEs to ask tax questions of. There's an additional tax bot out there that is structured to handle complex queries about my offshore account, which I've hidden in the Caymans, that I want to transfer to my wife's second cousin in Europe, and I need to hide this. How would I best do that and avoid the ATO? That's also out there. It's being purchased by some of the professional services firms, so their teams can spend more time on customer engagement than sitting looking at ATO texts and regulations for 5 days and charging them that amount. It's done in a minute or two. Free up the time for your people to engage better with the customers. So it is absolutely out there. And to give you a feel for how fast this is moving, there is a gentleman by the name of J.T. Kostman, K-O-S-T-M-A-N. J.T. is one of the top 100 experts globally in the field. And I had the pleasure of listening to him last week, and he made a very interesting observation. And it's two parts. The first is that AI moves in dog years. So 1 year of our calendar life is the equivalent of 10 years in AI development. So 10 years from now, we've done 100 years of AI development. Now, to put that in context, just to give you a feel for what 50 years roughly looks like, if you think about when Intel launched the first XT chip, early 70s, so I'd say 70s, 1970, it's not quite, it's 1972, but now, Intel worked out that the rate of progress in chips, if you applied to a Volkswagen Beetle made in the same year, you could now buy the Volkswagen Beetle for 3 cents. It will do 480,000 kilometers an hour as a top speed, and its mileage, it does 100 kilometers per 0.00014 liters per 100 k's. So if you are trying to understand what that rate of technological change in AI looks like, think about that, and then think about, do you think this isn't going to impact my industry? Ironically, the people that have been serving us this lovely breakfast this morning are probably safer than any of us in terms of professional roles, because the manual dexterity to navigate that room is very hard for an AI thing to do, a robot. The biggest thing for AI is subjectivity. So, you can all sit in this audience and go, Tim Dillon, George Clooney, which one's more attractive? We know the answer to that, and George's going to be very disappointed. But nonetheless, that's a subjective observation. Machines can't do that. Subjectivity and opinion is where AI falls over. It will be complementary to how we work, but you have to think about this. Because if you think of the scenario in terms of where that impacts, you'll have AI analytics on a data set that will come back into our organization, and we'll have to collaborate with that thing to achieve an outcome. We talked a lot about technology and all those sort of good things, but what else is important? Now, people either love or hate this slide. It's whoa. But these are important to people. This is, we said, what else is important to you at work? Now, the first comment is slides, beanbags, table tennis tables, cool, funky places, bottom. What's really more important? Equality, diversity. They're the top two. It's not about having a cool, funky workspace. It's about how do I use technology to achieve better equality, better diversity. Let's use the scenario of a lady that's just had a baby. She wants to come back to the work where she was. She was productive, she was engaged, she was a great employee of the organisation. We already have the technology to bring her back to the workforce, even if she's not in the office. We have to use technology to enable these top two, because they are very, very important from an organisational perspective. Don't overlook those aspects. There's some other basics up there, but those top two are very, very important. So those of you that are technologists, we all know that DevOps is a very topical thing, and it's rapid and it's agile and it's into production quickly and all those wonderful things. But it has a lot of resonance to our business culture. The traditional approach that we have to bringing products and services to our customers or our constituents, if we're government or whatever it's going to be, is fundamentally changing. It is a long-term sustained change. We have to create an agile culture. If you think about those three things that we mentioned at the start, there's rapid digitization and data, the workplace innovation technologies that are there, that we're already using in this multi-generational workforce, that is going to demand, absolutely demand an agile culture. And if you don't have that, you're not going to achieve those outcomes to your customers anywhere near as what your competitors could do, for example. So look, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again to Citrix and HP for being here. I really hope you enjoy the rest of the morning, and I'll pass you the clicker back, Sophie.
There's some really interesting insights there. One of the things we are doing with Tech Research Asia is continue to work with them to develop some reports and white papers, which we're going to publicly release and make sure that you all get a copy as well. And so with that, I'd like to invite PJ up on stage to give you a view of the vision and strategy for Citrix as a company. PJ.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks. Oops. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. You know, I think it's really interesting to reflect on some of the data points that Tim shared. By the way, that one where we tried to think about the people we work with and who we'd met or not met. That's the first time I think I've been asked that question, and it makes me very curious what the global data looks like. It's interesting to see the Australian data, and that's, I think, very relevant to everybody in this room. But I suspect, without having seen the data, that it's probably a very global phenomenon, and certainly one that, as I looked around at my fellow Citrix employees, I think it's one that we all experience on a frequent basis. You know, one of the great things about my job is the amount of time that I get to spend meeting with customers and partners, really thinking about, you know, work, thinking about the future of work, and what a privilege it is to have a role where I get to devote my time to that and then, you know, work on technology and tools that help improve it. The shifts that are occurring in our industry, you know, it's, I think, often said that there are no new ideas, that we're constantly recycling old ideas. And certainly if you look at the patterns of shifts in the technology industry, a lot of this to me starts to feel a little bit like, in some ways, centralization all over again. From a very decentralized world of IT in some ways to centralization happening in the cloud. And yet this incredible diversity of devices and applications that are also spinning up at exactly the same time. And no matter where you are on this timeline or where your industry is, there's almost no one who is operating their business like it's on the left side. It's also true that not only are there very few companies at the right side, I'm not sure anyone ever completely gets there. I think the hybrid diverse environment is the new normal. I think it'll be very hard to turn out the lights in your last data center. I think if you have physical plant and equipment, if you are in a medical field, serving patients, there are many, many, many examples where we need physical infrastructure deployed in our environments, as well as having access to the world's best services hosted in the cloud. So this is a picture of not just something that Citrix, I think, our view of the world. This is our lens onto what's happening in our customer base, and frankly, inside Citrix itself. As a large organization, we're going through this exact same transformation. And while we're moving our products and services to Citrix Cloud, we're also moving to cloud-based SAP. We are a Workday customer. We use Concur. We have all of the SaaS applications. People can bring their own devices to work. We try to support people working from home as much as possible. So we both, as an organization, live this, but I think we also reflect that it's also the world that you as customers are living. Now, while there are so many advantages that we can talk about with regard to how this technology has improved our productivity, improved our speed to market, reduced cycle times for product development, new innovative ideas, it has come at a pretty high cost, mostly to our employees, with regard to the complexity that they see in their lives. And frankly, it's come at a pretty high cost to IT also. When you think about the impact of all of these new types of applications on user experience, gone are the days. I mean, I worked for a long time at Microsoft. I spent more than 20 years there, including 17 of that in Office, where affectionately the color scheme was called Battleship Gray. And you all remember those days when all Windows applications looked more or less alike. File, edit, view, help across the top. It was very, very common. And we lived for a very short period of time in this world where everyone had the same kind of computer with the same types of apps. And you could do things like train employees on a common set of tools and technologies. Think about it now. Open the most popular 5 apps on your phone that you use for work, and look at the diversity of user experience, the number of tricks you have to remember, and that's on that one device. Switch to your favorite tablet, go to your desktop at work from a kiosk in an airport or in a hotel, and it's just mind-boggling the impact of user experience that people have to sort of keep in mind today. And it's not just a minor inconvenience. It can really inhibit the way people work. My favorite example is I use Concur at work. I don't use it very often, but I do approve a lot of business expenses and travel expenses for other employees. If I get a notification that says there's an expense waiting to be approved when I'm sitting at my desk, believe it or not, I take out my phone, because on the mobile device, the approval app for Concur is super efficient. It's an optimized user experience, and rather than fumbling around in the app online, I actually flip device. That's an example of, my workflow gets broken from what I'm doing on my desk to go switch. I actually physically switch devices to accomplish a task. That shouldn't be the case. It should be that activity is easily integrated into my workspace, and that I can do that in a fluid way, no matter where I'm working or no matter what device I'm working on. So that's on the user side. If you think about it from an IT perspective, we've created a plethora of new challenges. People like me roaming around the planet, carrying potentially sensitive data, maybe a company-owned device, maybe more than one device, maybe it's my device. I'm connecting not only back to corporate resources, I'm also probably connecting to cloud services and cloud assets through the local airport Wi-Fi, which we know is not the most secure Wi-Fi in the world, or maybe a coffee shop Wi-Fi. And so now you think about, not only has the physical perimeter disappeared for us as organizations, but we actually are trying to support employees who are trying to work in all these important and creative ways. So really, we're really thinking deeply about this as a new work pattern, not as a temporary behavior. I don't think we're ever going to go back to enterprises having people show up 9 to 5 inside physical offices. This is the new sort of work pattern and sort of life pattern, I think, that we're all seeing brought together. And frankly, the only way that we can conceptually think about this, it makes sense to us, is to actually think about the employee experience. Put the employee in the middle, and then build the environment around them. Build it around them with regard to the devices you give them. Build it around them with regard to the security perimeter. The security perimeter that's most interesting to Citrix when I travel is me. This lady is in a little bubble. If I could travel in a little Citrix bubble as I moved around, I think Stan from IT and security would be happiest. And so we start to think about the problem in a very different way. Rather than creating a very secure infrastructure that's broadly deployed, like enterprises did in the past, you start thinking about securing experiences, securing applications, securing people, and delivering the experience that they need. And as I move around, I think my usage pattern of technology is very different than some other people in the organization, which means that the way that you treat me as an employee has to be dynamic. It's actually really impossible to write the rules for my access to corporate resources. This is my first time in quite a long time in Australia, but I've already been to our office in Sydney. I'll be in our office here in Melbourne, but I'll also be accessing all of my corporate resources and doing my job from the airport, from the hotel, from the back of a cab. And so now think about how dynamic that environment has to be if it's to really react to the kind of work that I want to do and the types of places that I need to do it. And really, the thing that we've focused most on, and that you'll hear us speak about throughout the rest of the day, is really thinking about the workspace that we give to employees. And making that workspace be a quality environment where you can get your best work done. Not just a place to launch apps, not just a place to find them, but a place to actually get work done. We think there are critical elements inside the workspace. The first one is, of course, access to your apps. And by this, I mean all your applications, not just your virtual apps and your desktops, but also think about all of the SaaS applications. I wrote a blog post about a week ago, and several people have picked up one quote from it that's getting retweeted, which is SaaS applications may be the easiest apps in the world to deploy, and they may be the most difficult apps in the world to secure. And certainly when you think about the data flows from your tablet or your PC or your phone to a cloud application that's not going through your corporate network, your IT has practically no visibility to what data is moving up and down over what kind of network. And so in the workspace, we're bringing the quality of experience and the security and visibility that we've traditionally brought to virtual desktops and apps. We're bringing all of that to SaaS applications. And that's a crucial shift for us as we think about the shift in application portfolios that you are all dealing with on a daily basis. The second thing is content. We tend to focus very much on applications, but if you think about where risk truly lies in organizations, or where intellectual property or business value lies, not all of it is trapped inside your applications. Some of it's in that business proposal you wrote, or the contract that you're working on with the partner, or the patent filing that you're doing, or the new process that you're documenting. There are all of these things that live in content, in documents. And in fact, some of my most valuable work product is not clicking approve buttons in Concur. It's actually working on real content that helps drive the company strategy and the company vision. So we believe that content is a first-class citizen also inside that workspace. And then the last part is just the diversity of devices and the need to support a consistent workspace experience across all the platforms and all of the devices. And, of course, wrap it all with security. That security promise that is so fundamental to Citrix and to the way that we think about delivering value to businesses needs now to extend to cover these brand new scenarios. It needs to embrace the wide range of devices, the locations from which I might work, and in fact, it needs to adapt to the policy of the organization as I move around. So a much more dynamic environment, a much broader one, a very exciting one, and clearly one that if we work successfully on it, it really helps us deliver on the promise of the future of work. At Synergy, which is now 93 days ago, I think, I stood on stage and I made this bold pronouncement that everything that we demoed in the Synergy keynote we were going to ship within 90 days. Well, I am proud and glad to tell you that we posted the blog on Monday that had the full list of everything that we had demoed in the Synergy keynote, and it's all available in market. So in some ways, we talk about the future of work, but I think it's now. I think this future is very live, it's very real, it's happening. Different rates for different organizations, but I don't think there's any reason to wait to get started. I think many of you as organizations already have, and we're delighted to partner with you on that journey. And with that, I'd love to turn it back over to Safi. Thank you.
So the Synergy conference PJ mentioned is our annual customer conference. It's where we share our vision and strategy for the company. We showcase our innovations, enhancements to existing products, new products, and some R&D that we're working on as well. But this Synergy was an interesting one because it was actually the first Synergy since we brought together our product management and product engineering teams under a common leadership. And what this has meant is that the pace of innovation, the pace of new products and services has vastly increased. And over the course of the next hour, Simon and I will take you through those critical announcements. Rather than just go through the list of announcements, what we've done is frame them in 4 core challenges that we feel most organizations are dealing with. The rise of SaaS and web applications, how you embrace public and private clouds, how to drive a greater level of automation from an IT perspective to gain more efficiency and more agility, and how you can support a more flexible workforce, ultimately increasing the employee experience. So I'm going to hand over to Simon now to kick things off. Before I do that, just a reminder to complete those evaluation forms, because as I said, they are aligned with the content that you're about to see now. Simon.
As more applications move to the cloud, the security perimeter is no longer at the edge of the data center. This creates a need for application security efficacy. You need protection against a range of cybersecurity threats that's cost-effective, with deep threat visibility, flexibility of form factors, and centralized management for both on-premise and cloud deployments. That is application security efficacy. And now you can achieve it with Citrix NetScaler Application Security, which includes an industry-leading web application firewall recommended by NSS Labs, comprehensive DDoS protection across the network, infrastructure, and application layers, a strong identity and access management solution for secure application access from anywhere, centralized management and real-time analytics, giving you pre-attack prevention, runtime attack forensics, and post-attack reporting to help you manage your hybrid cloud deployments all in real time, all in one place. And it's all built into your ADC, and available across all NetScaler ADC form factors: physical, multi-tenant, and virtual. We are redefining the ADC with Citrix NetScaler, the ADC that helps you achieve strong application security efficacy so you can say yes to peace of mind. Peace of mind.
You've heard this morning from Safi and from PJ about how we've unified the various engineering teams within Citrix. And I think the security domain is the one area where it's most apparent the advantages we get by bringing all of these teams together and creating synergies between the entire portfolio of Citrix products. And so this morning I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these specific new security outcomes that we're able to deliver by combining our existing technology portfolio and adding some new products and services to that. Now, before we go into the actual details of the security outcomes, let's start by understanding why these new security outcomes are so important. And to do this, we need to understand a little bit about security strategy. The simplest strategy for security has traditionally been the perimeter defense. And the perimeter defense works on the premise that we can bring all of the things that we need to protect into a single physical, defensible location, and we bring the people who need to access those things to that same location and control how they use them. And we've been doing this for thousands of years. Even in conventional digital security, we've applied this principle. We've broken our networks down into secure segments. We've used technology like firewalls, like intrusion detection systems to protect these secure segments. And then we bring our users into the specific parts of the network to allow them to have access, whether that be within a data center, within a DMZ. It's all based on physical location. But the event of mobility and the migration to the cloud has really rendered these strategies obsolete, and it's created all of these new challenges. We now have the concepts of people using BYO devices that we can no longer control from a corporate perspective. We have people using third-party contractors, business process outsourcing, where so many of the users are using hardware that's no longer within our control. Our data, our intellectual property, is now so often residing in the cloud as part of a private or public cloud initiative, or it resides in an application, a SaaS application, an application that's running on somebody else's infrastructure. I don't even know what the physical location is for that data that's running through those SaaS applications. So I certainly can't apply the traditional physical approach to securing, protecting that data. So this new architecture of cloud centricity, it creates some new risks, it creates some new usability challenges, and it also revives some of the old risks but presents them in a different format, and we need a new approach to mitigation. In response to this, most organizations have adopted dozens and dozens of individual point solutions to tackle these risks and usability challenges. We have things like new productivity services, identity and access tools, endpoint management services, app delivery, security, application delivery, networking, all of these different point solutions that all come together and provide come with a very distinct cost. So the research is showing that the combination of all of these services costs the average mid to large organization between $800 and $1,000 per user per annum, and that's just to procure these services. There's also an increasing complexity that comes with piecing all of these services together, and with complexity comes more risk. And ironically, it's actually that same risk that we were originally trying to overcome by adopting these services in the first place. So it creates this vicious cycle. Our approach to these challenges was to define what we call the secure digital perimeter. The secure digital perimeter is not a new offering from Citrix. It's simply a framework for integrating the existing Citrix technology that most of you already have in your organizations to get better security outcomes. The secure digital perimeter works on the premise that we have our users, we have our apps and data, the digital assets, and we need to protect the users and those assets from attackers. Some of those attackers are motivated adversaries, people who specifically want to attack your organization to either disrupt it or to steal your data, as well as all of the persistent threats on the internet, the scripted automated attacks that are just probing, looking for vulnerabilities, the cyber warfare that's going on, and we could accidentally get caught up as collateral damage. So we need to establish a perimeter defense that can protect against those threats, but still allow the users to do their job. The secure digital perimeter provides 4 general outcomes. The first is to protect the data, protect that portable data that's now being carried outside the firewall, your intellectual property, your content that PJ was talking about before. The second aspect is to give the right users the right access to the right resources by the right method at the right time. The third part is protecting those users from being compromised by malware. And the fourth part is how do we protect the applications that are presented over the network from attackers from hacking them. I'm going to delve into each of these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but before I do, there's another key part that's important, and this is new. It's the ability to combine all of these things together to draw insights from tracking user behavior and to be able to adapt the posture of the secure digital perimeter according to the risk that we're seeing. And I'm going to talk about that more in a few minutes. Let's start by looking at protecting data and intellectual property. The first scenario here would be we have mobile users with mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, and so on. Now, the chances are that these are BYO devices, so we may not be able to have full control of the device. But nevertheless, there's going to be corporate data that's stored on that, whether it's in an asset, whether it's in an application, or if it's files that are stored locally. So we need some way of ensuring that any sensitive corporate data that's stored on that device is encrypted, so that if that device falls into the wrong hands, or in the event that we cease to trust the person who holds that device, that we can simply reach out and destroy it. And even if somebody did get the encrypted data, it wouldn't be any use to them anyway. So that's fairly straightforward. The catch here, though, in a BYO scenario, one of the elements of friction in adopting a BYO strategy is that there's usually that acceptable use policy you sign that says, I agree that the company can reach into my device at any time and access my data and destroy things on my device. And if my personal memories are stored on that device, the photographs of my kid growing up are stored on that device, I'll be very reluctant to enroll in that program. So we need to ensure that there's containerization of the corporate data to protect it without necessarily giving the IT administrator the ability to destroy the personal memories. The next scenario is protecting the data in flight between the applications on device and the servers in the cloud, the SaaS servers, the private cloud, the data center, wherever our applications are hosted. And so this is simply about protecting from eavesdropping. The more interesting scenario, though, is how do we protect data, content, files, intellectual property that's shared between, for example, your customers and your colleagues, or between 2 colleagues in the same organization, or between you and your business partners. How do we ensure that that content is secure and is not likely to leak? And I'd like all of you to think about the last time you had in dealing with a professional services organization as a consumer. Think about last time you were working with an accountant, a real estate agent, a solicitor, even in some cases medical professionals. And these are all engagements where frequently you will be asked to share sensitive information. Information that if it fell into the wrong hands, it could be used against you for identity theft or fraud. And how many of those engagements have you been through where they simply asked you to send an unencrypted file as an attachment in an email? And what happens when we send that sensitive data in an email? Well, firstly, that data gets replicated across the email clients on all of the devices that you use to access email. Lots of unencrypted copies appear. Then it gets sent, most likely unencrypted, across the internet. And then it hits the corporate email servers, where it'll probably then be replicated across multiple email clients again. And then it'll be backed up to various backup repositories on your side and their side. And we've now created dozens and dozens and dozens of copies of that same piece of sensitive information, which means our attack surface is huge. If any one of those those locations gets compromised, our sensitive data leaks. And that's why we need to provide a better way. So the secure digital perimeter includes the ability to be able to facilitate secure, intuitive collaboration between your colleagues and your customers. Basically, anybody who can access a web browser is able to securely share sensitive information without the risk of leakage. Most of you already know that we can provide contextual secure access. In fact, many of you in this room are already using our technology to allow your users to have access to your systems via a single URL. Regardless of their role or their device or their location, they'll come into a single URL. They'll log into that, and you're able to then use that to provide strong authentication, create very sophisticated authentication policies, apply multi-factor, apply whatever you want to ensure that you're checking that that person is the right person, that the device is sufficiently secure to allow them to have access. You're probably also using the ability to automatically choose which applications are relevant to that user according to their role and present all of those applications as icons so that the user's workflow is really streamlined. They can launch any one of those applications simply by clicking on it, and they'll be seamlessly signed into that application. It'll launch in another browser window, and they're often working. What you probably don't know is that we've now enhanced this contextual secure access to include some machine learning and some AI techniques that are able to look a little bit deeper into the context. So we can now start to ask questions not based on a static policy, but is it normal? Is it normal for this customer, or for this user, to be attempting to access our systems from this location? Is it normal for them to access this application? Is it normal for them to be trying to get online at this time of day? Is it normal for them to be logging in from Melbourne and the Ukraine simultaneously? And we can start to draw some inferences about what's normal versus anomalous and assign risk to that. So we've added this analytics capability, machine learning and AI functions there that can help us to expand the elements of context around making these decisions. We've also enhanced the controls that we can now apply in response to that context. So for example, if we have a user who's attempting to access a particularly sensitive application, but they're coming in from a device that we don't trust. It's not a managed SOE laptop, it's some unknown asset. We may not want any remnants of sensitive corporate data to be left in the browser cache on that device. But this guy needs to be able to do his job. So we can specify that in this case, we trust the user, we don't trust the device. Perhaps we present this application in a secure browser that will only leave pixels on the device, not actually leave data in the browser cache at the end of the session. We're going to talk a bit more about that later. Malware. Malware has been a big problem for many, many organizations over the past couple of years, and it continues to be pervasive. And the type of malware threat we're looking at specifically here is phishing attacks. It's where the attacker attempts to evoke an emotional response that tricks the user into clicking before they think and rationally process that they're the victim of fraud. This is a real phishing attack. My Netflix account has been terminated, so I need to click on this to make sure that I don't lose my access to movies. Now, we need a last bastion of defense to protect these users who succumb to the attacks. Many of them are extremely convincing. So the secure digital perimeter is able to differentiate between a trusted website and a website that we know to be malicious. But what really sets this offering apart in the market is how we deal with the grey area. So we talk about a trusted website. We can safely assume that a New South Wales or Victorian or any Australian government website is likely to be secure and safe and not going to be a source of malware infection. We can similarly assume that the banks are not going to be a source of malware infection. On the other hand, we know that there's certain sites that are infected or are frequently used as vectors for these attacks. We can blacklist them. And most of those sites will probably also fall into the domain of sites that contravene your acceptable use policy. They're likely to be associated with pornography or illegal file sharing or any number of things that it's probably okay to simply blacklist those sites because people can still do their jobs and you're not going to be affecting the way they work. But what about the grey area? What about all of those sites that they've only been active for a short time? We've got no reason to specifically mistrust them, but on the other hand, we don't know for a fact they're safe. So let's understand a little bit about how web browsers work and how SaaS applications work to understand our approach to this. When a user fires up their browser and connects to a SaaS application, that SaaS application comes down from the cloud and runs to some extent in their local browser, and some of the data from that application is usually left in the cache on that local device. When that user then connects to an infected website, the infection comes down to their browser, and that can potentially lead to data exfiltration. The malware can siphon some of the data off the local device back up into the cloud. We now have data leakage. Our approach to this is when the user connects to the SaaS application, they do it through the access control service. So the access control service simply spins up a brand new instance of a virtual Chrome browser somewhere up in the cloud. It's a single-use browser. So the SaaS application runs in that browser and streams pixels down to the user's browser. As far as the user's concerned, it's just like working natively directly to the SaaS application. It's all happening in their local browser visually, but the data is actually all remaining in the secure browser instance. At the end of that session, that virtual browser instance is destroyed, and any data that was cached in that session is gone with it. So now when we connect to the infected website, a new virtual browser spins up in the cloud, it gets infected, only the pixels come down to the user's device, and at the end of the session, the infected browser is destroyed, and because there was never any data path between the infected browser and the user's machine or the corporate network, we have no remnants of the infection left in any of the corporate assets. So this is how we protect against phishing attacks and other types of malware infections based on web attacks. All of the elements we've discussed so far of the secure digital perimeter focus around the users and the apps and data. What we now need to look at is what about the applications that we're presenting to the network, we're publishing online. And these applications are probably one of the largest areas of vulnerability to attack by hackers. We know that more than 3/4 of attack traffic that we see on the network are application layer attacks. And to understand why applications are so vulnerable, we need to get a little bit technical, just a little bit. So what you see on the screen there is a representation of the OSI model. And the OSI model is nothing more than a framework for showing how all of the protocols stack up that are needed to deliver applications across the network. The bottom 4 layers are the network layers, and this is what network firewalls do. They protect your network from attacks that happen at those layers. They do a really, really good job. Network firewalls keep out most of the unwanted traffic. They keep out all of the traffic that's constantly scanning the entire internet, looking for looking for vulnerabilities, looking for doors that have been left open that it can then get through and explore and find a chink in your armor and get into your network. And so the network firewall is great at keeping all of that traffic out. Unfortunately, the network firewall cannot keep out the most unwanted traffic. The most unwanted traffic is the traffic that's a motivated attacker who knows exactly what application you have and is masquerading as a legitimate user of that application to exploit it. The network firewall sees this attacker and says, it's a user attempting to access the application. I'll let him through. Because it can't tell the difference between a legitimate user and an attacker. So, how do we deal with this? We apply an application firewall, web application firewall. It runs in conjunction with the network firewall or the next-gen firewall, but the difference is that the application firewall is really only looking at those higher layers, and it understands the logic of the application. It's able to differentiate between a legitimate user sitting at the browser trying to access the app and an attacker who's sitting at the same browser but trying to subvert the application and exploit its logic. It's also able to tell the difference between a scripted automated attack that's simply trying to brute force the application or seek vulnerabilities to that application layer, but by masquerading as a user. Now, some of you may be thinking, my applications aren't that sensitive. So what if somebody gets into the rostering system? Fine. Attackers want you to be thinking like that. because attackers aren't necessarily looking to steal the data from you, the applications you're publishing. They're simply looking for a way into your environment so that they can find the good stuff. And if you've got weakly protected applications that are accessible to the attacker, they will use that to try and subvert those applications to gain control of the servers on which they run and use those servers as a beachhead to launch further attacks from within your own network. And in fact, the research is showing that somewhere in the vicinity of 60% of successful application attacks come from within the firewall because a user's device or a piece of infrastructure like a weakly defended server has been compromised previously and is used as a beachhead for further attacks. So to protect against these attacks, we need to deploy application firewalls in conjunction with the network firewalls, and this is all part of the secure digital perimeter. We've just covered the four main outcomes of the secure digital perimeter, and the real challenge for security is not so much providing these defenses, it's about striking the right balance between ensuring that the users get the most seamless, least friction workflow that they can have, against trying to ensure that we have the minimum risk that an attacker will actually get through and cause harm. And PJ talked about the way he operates and how difficult it would be to write a static policy that determines what is normal behavior for him and therefore what type of access policies should be enforced. The best approach is actually to use machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques that can constantly monitor and adapt to the baseline of what is normal user behavior. And it can then identify what constitutes anomalous user behavior. Now, anomalous user behavior doesn't necessarily mean bad user behavior. It just means something is unusual and deserves some further inspection. There are some types of behavior that we can immediately recognize as indicators of risk. But we need to bring all of this together and make some intelligent decisions about just how risky is this behavior, and then based on that intelligence, what level of control should be enforced to mitigate the risk of harm. So with that in mind, let me introduce you to Citrix Analytics.
Sophisticated security attacks, especially from those inside your own organization, are not always easy to uncover. Imposters often pose as trusted employees using compromised credentials. Detecting and combating these threats require continuous, advanced analysis. Citrix Analytics uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to discover previously hard-to-detect threats and recommend proactive steps you can take to prevent data loss and other harm to the business. How does it work? Let's take a look at user security. Here, Citrix Analytics can see every user in your organization and creates an associated risk profile. Risk indicators compare anomalies to an evolving baseline, grouping the users into three categories: high, medium, and low. Select a high-risk user to display their event history and look for the indicators that might have placed them in this group, like excessive access to sensitive files. Select the risk indicator to see specific details. You can also see the steps Citrix Analytics took to prevent the behavior from going any further. It's easy to get started with Citrix Analytics by connecting to any Citrix offering you've deployed. For Citrix Cloud services, simply turn on the transmission of data. For on-premises deployments, you'll be guided through an agent installation. You can also simply set up custom conditional rules. For example, if someone downloads excessive files from ShareFile, the resulting action could be a recorded Zen app or Zen desktop session. Whether you have a cloud, on-premises, or hybrid environment, Citrix Analytics aggregates data across users, devices, networks, apps, and files to build comprehensive visibility into user behavior. You'll be able to detect, predict, and resolve issues. To learn more about how Citrix Analytics can help you combat insider security threats, visit analytics.cloud.com.
As you can see, what we've created here is a closed-loop system. So we bring together the entire Citrix portfolio. We draw intelligence from that portfolio that indicates the user behavior and also any overt indicators of risk that infrastructure can detect. We bring it together into an analytics engine, And by combining all of that information together and using the ML or machine learning and AI techniques against it, we can then establish a risk score. We assign that risk score to each user, and then we detect changes in the risk score. And as the risk escalates, we trigger policy actions. And those policy actions close the loop by sending signals back into the infrastructure to adjust the security controls for that user to ensure that we minimize the risk of actual harm. Quick reminder, we're covering a lot of content today over so many different topics that we really only get to scratch the surface. And if any of these messages are resonating with you and you would like more information, please mark it down on the eval forms and we'll be delighted to come and have a chat with you about things in more detail. Now, the latest figures are showing that about half of your applications are probably delivered by SaaS today. And by within the next 18 months, we expect that to rise to around about 80%. So the real question here is, how can we ensure that we apply these same level, if not better, security controls to SaaS applications as we do to applications that reside in the private cloud or corporate environment? Let's recap how we've approached this challenge in the past. For the applications that reside in the data center, we typically deploy proxies, devices like NetScaler that sit in front of these applications and protect them and make sure they're highly available. We then adopt some SaaS applications and we need to improve the user experience, so we adopt some single sign-on mechanisms, maybe with NetScaler, maybe with cloud services. And then we have all of the shadow IT, the unsanctioned IT apps, and the undesirable internet access. We put web content filtering solutions in place to ensure that we protect the users from all that. There's also a bunch of other things that come with this, but this is just really simplifying it down to the basic points. We're very excited to announce this week we've launched a new service, the Access Control Service, which brings all of these capabilities together into a single cloud-based service that also integrates with our user behavior analytics capabilities and all the other secure digital perimeter aspects we've talked about today so that you can get a complete unified view. There's three broad benefits that we will deliver with the Citrix Access Control Service. The first one is giving you end-to-end policy control over SaaS applications just as you have for your on-prem or private cloud applications. The ability to enforce controls such as limiting a user's access to the browser, to the clipboard, to copy and paste functions on their device when they're accessing a sensitive application. The ability to limit their access to local printing for a sensitive application. And also some data loss prevention deterrents such as watermarking. So if we have sensitive data presented on screen, we watermark that display so that should somebody take screenshots or even photographs of that screen, we'll be able to see what was the source of that leak with the user's identity and the IP address and so on that's stamped on it. So previously, we've only been able to do this with virtualized apps. Now we're extending that out to deliver it to SaaS applications that are coming from somebody else's cloud. We're just wrapping some secure control around that. The second area of benefit for Access Control Service is your ability to see how those apps are being used. Your ability to start building a profile of what is normal behavior in terms of who's accessing what applications and when, how are they using those applications, track that usage, and get a level of visibility that today you just simply do not have. The third benefit, of course, is to the user. Streamlining that user's experience. They no longer need to remember multiple sets of credentials. They no longer need lists of bookmarks in their browser to be able to access all the different applications. They no longer need to go through a different workflow according to which device they're using or what location they're in. And to take us through the actual user experience, I'm now going to hand over to Safi.
Thanks, Simon. So PJ talked about a number of the commitments he had made at Synergy, and one of them was the new Workspace application. And I'm really excited to take you through what that experience is going to look like. It's a unified workspace that gives your end users everything they need to be productive. You've got one way to get access to all of the different applications they need, not just Windows and virtual applications, but SaaS, web, and mobile applications as well. You've got one way to organize and get access to all of your files, whether those files live in on-premise network file servers or up in cloud data services like OneDrive. You've got one way that integrates all of the things that you've deployed in your on-premise data center and gives you one way to then embrace the move that you're going to make to the public cloud as well. And the thing that we've also done is make this experience dynamic and adaptive. It adapts to the context of the end user, thanks to our analytics capability and the secured digital perimeter. So let me take you through a bit more closely as to what that workspace experience looks like. The first thing we've focused on is delivering a unified experience. Regardless of what device you're on, what location you're on, the way the users work and the way the users access these resources is exactly the same. No longer does a user have to remember, okay, I'm in the office, I'm on my corporate issue PC, I need to access my apps this way. But then when I'm on my BYO phone, I need to do it this way. It's all the same. Consistent experience, really enabling the user to have a much more positive employee experience. This is what the interface looks like once the user has logged in. And you see there we've framed it and aggregated all the different resources that they need. At the top, all of their applications. Web apps, SaaS apps, mobile, Windows, virtual, they're all there in the one place. All of their data, regardless of whether that data lives on-premise in your data centers or in third-party cloud data services, they're there as well. And if you do use virtual desktops, whether they're Windows or Linux, you'll get access to those in the same workspace. And Simon introduced a new access control service, enabling you to provide more security controls around how you're accessing your SaaS and web applications. I want to take you through now a quick demonstration of how that works in the workspace. So here I've got a user that's logged in, and you can see there's a couple of SaaS applications there. He launches the first one, and you can see it launches a new tab in the local browser with a single sign-on experience. The user didn't have to remember any URLs, any username and passwords. It's all securely through. The second app they launched, you'll see it has a slightly different experience there because it contains sensitive data. So it's actually launching in an embedded secure browser, all with the security controls that Simon spoke about. So you can see the watermark there. And we've also able to restrict the ability to copy and paste data to prevent that data leakage. The access control services then come over the top to prevent access to certain websites or control the access. And you can see there they clicked on the Citrix support website, which went through. Hopefully you guys don't have to visit that too often. But then the second website was Pirate Bay. And obviously that's not a nice site to access, especially at work. And you can see that was blocked. So let's just break down what exactly happened. The user logged into their workspace, they got presented with all of their applications. The first application didn't contain any sensitive data. So we've turned that enhanced security capabilities off. So it just opens up in a local browser with a single sign-on experience. The second application contains sensitive information. So we've turned that enhanced security policy on. That policy brings a whole range of additional security controls, adding watermarks, preventing the copy and paste of data, preventing printing. And then from there, we have the additional filtering capabilities to control and filter the types of websites people are accessing. And for an even elevated level of security, you've got the hosted secure browser capability that Simon talked about. And to make it even easier to start embracing SaaS applications within that workspace, we've already integrated many of the most popular SaaS applications directly into the Citrix workspace. And we continue to add more and more of these SaaS applications all the time. So now let's talk about data. How many people are using a cloud data service like OneDrive or Dropbox or Box? I think a lot of you guys, right? I can be pretty certain that you've still got data in your on-premise data centers as well. And think about that from an end user perspective. A user's got to remember Is the data I need on-premise in a map network drive, or is it up there in OneDrive and I have to access them in different ways? The power that we bring to you in the Citrix Workspace app is to give the user one place to go, regardless of whether that data lives in OneDrive or another third-party cloud data service or in your existing network files shares, even in applications like SharePoint, Documentum, and HP Trim. Let me take you through what that experience looks like from within the Workspace application. So here I've expanded the Citrix Files capability, which is the service that aggregates all of the different data stores. I can browse through my files regardless of where they live, and because of the integration we have with Office 365, I can immediately edit and preview the document, all without having to require additional applications. We've also simplified the endpoint management experience. At the moment, typically, if you want to manage an endpoint, you need to deploy an additional client, whether it's an MDM client, whether it's ours, the mobile, or a third party. Again, to simplify that end user experience, we've integrated that endpoint capability into the Workspace application as well. So from an end user perspective, all they need to do is download the Citrix Workspace application on their device, whether it's corporate issued or BYO. Once they've downloaded, they launch the application, they simply enter a URL or their email address. The Workspace app then communicates with the Workspace service on Citrix Cloud and prompts them for authentication. Now, if they're on an iOS device, we actually support Touch ID as well. Again, simplifying that experience, making it more efficient from an end user perspective. Once that's authenticated, the user then gets presented with their workspace. Now think about that from an onboarding experience. If I'm a new user, I'm on my day one, I bring my device in, that's all I need to go through. Just download the Workspace app, authenticate, and I can be immediately productive. It's pretty powerful. One of the other things about the Workspace we're doing, and this is really exciting as well, is we're going beyond just applications, data, and desktops. And we're really extending the Workspace to start embracing your business processes as well. How many people use Servicenow? A fair few of you guys, for different things within your business, but I'm sure for conducting IT business processes as well. So one of the things I'm pleased to announce is that we're also about to release a connector for Servicenow. Or actually, PJ, I think we've released it now. It's out. Tick. That's another tick for this week. And so with this connector, what you'll be able to do is integrate your IT business processes directly with the Workspace. So if I'm a user and I'm requesting access to Salesforce, I kick that request off in Servicenow, and once that's approved, the user will automatically get provisioned with access to Salesforce. Pretty neat and really simple. And there's one final thing that we've also done with the Workspace, and that's we've enabled you to make it your own. And so with the Workspace, we'll include a branding service where you can completely customize the look and feel of the Citrix Workspace to match your organization's identity. Not only the Workspace application, but the icons that appear on the desktop and in the Start menu as well. Pretty cool stuff, right? So we've talked a lot about SaaS applications. Simon talked about how we secure SaaS applications. I spoke about how we can aggregate and simplify the access to SaaS applications with the Workspace application. One of the other elements to SaaS and web apps is how you guarantee the performance and availability. A lot's changed in the way applications are stored, and I wanted to share a case study with you of a local customer who we helped deliver the performance that they needed from their Azure applications, leveraging our SD-WAN solution.
NetScaler SD-WAN creates reliable network connections from users to the Microsoft Azure Cloud. By aggregating 2 or more connections and selecting the best path for network traffic, SD-WAN ensures that a network outage won't impact application performance or business operations. Ryman Healthcare used NetScaler SD-WAN with Azure as it moved to a paperless patient record system.
I'm Roger Sillers, IT Manager for Ryman Healthcare. Ryman Healthcare are a leading retirement living company based in New Zealand and Australia. In order to provide high quality paperless systems, we need to have a highly agile and resilient IT infrastructure. The Microsoft Azure Cloud really helped us achieve this goal. Moving to fully electronic requires a different level of infrastructure than was previously required, something that's dynamic, flexible, adaptable, and can scale to our demands as we keep pushing boundaries in healthcare. We have multiple communication links into each of our villages. We have a high-speed MPLS network as well as internet connections. Both of these are at risk of somebody down the street digging them up, so we have invested in 4G circuits into the villages. The Citrix NetScaler SD-WAN enables us to team these together, providing a high-speed, resilient, dynamic and self-healing infrastructure. The Microsoft Azure platform has really enabled us to help go paperless. Microsoft Azure and the Citrix SD-WAN provide us an environment that is scalable, dynamic, flexible and resilient. This enables us to provide the care that we demand for our residents.
So let's have a look at why SaaS applications suffer from performance issues. For a long time we've built our branch networks, our WANs, all geared towards accessing applications that live in the data center. But now as we're starting to move applications into public clouds and starting to consume the third-party applications from SaaS providers, that same network isn't able to cope. And the other thing to consider is that SaaS and web applications these days are typically richer. There's more graphics, there's more interactive video. So our existing WANs aren't able to cope with the additional demands that these are asking for. And ultimately the end user experience is impacted. And for this reason, Citrix SD-WAN provides the flexibility to really build a more agile and cloud-ready WAN. It enables you to leverage new types of internet connectivity like NBN, like DSL, combine them all to create a flexible virtual wide area network that dynamically routes traffic based on the fastest and shortest path. It enables you to take the approach of breaking out to the internet directly at the branch, all with still the right levels of security, but ensuring that your end users get the performance that they need from their SaaS and web applications. One of the other things I'm really excited to announce is that we've just launched a new service with Microsoft specifically for customers who are hosting applications on Azure. Let's hear a bit more about that.
I'm happy to announce that Microsoft is enhancing and expanding its long-standing partnership with Citrix with a new Azure Virtual WAN service based on Citrix SD-WAN. Citrix SD-WAN will be available as a default cloud on-ramp to Azure's global network and regions of data centers, accelerating cloud-based delivery of applications to branch offices around the world. As a pioneer in the application and content delivery technologies, Citrix SD-WAN continues to help customers optimize and automate cross-premises Azure branch office network deployments. Azure Virtual WAN subscribers will benefit from a high quality of experience and the strong integrated security services the solution provides.
So of the many SD-WAN vendors out there, we decided to align with Citrix because their SD-WAN is a true, built from the ground up SD-WAN. It's not some bolt-on to an existing product line. The technology can be deployed as a complete SD-WAN service stack that provides our customers the best that SD-WAN has to offer, with providing the highest possible business and user experience. We often say to our customers, you don't manage your WAN today, so why would you want to manage an SD-WAN? So for us, the platform is really great as it's flexible enough to be offered as a managed cloud service to solve this challenge. The fact that Microsoft has chosen Citrix to provide an SD-WAN solution as the on-ramp to Azure, it really comes as no surprise to us. It is evident with our Farmlands project. The maturity and breadth of the product enabled us to deploy SD-WAN quickly and most importantly at the scale and throughput required by Farmlands.
Overall, we believe Azure's customers will find the combination of Azure Virtual WAN and Citrix SD-WAN as a great solution to ensure high-performing, reliable, and controllable delivery of their cloud platform with the deep visibility modern networks require.
Some interesting developments then, and definitely if yourself or any of your partners and customers are looking at hosting Azure applications on Azure, something to definitely check out. Talking about cloud, I wanted to talk briefly about Citrix Cloud. Now, Citrix Cloud is our platform for delivering our capabilities as a service. What it isn't, though, it's not like an Azure or AWS. We don't actually host workloads for applications and data, but we deliver a control plane. All the management capabilities to look after those services, to administer those services, are delivered out of Citrix Cloud. And earlier this year, we launched an instance of the control plane here in Australia as well, to maximize the performance and address any concerns organizations may have around compliance and sovereignty. But Citrix Cloud is also an ideal starting point for your journey into the digital workspace. Now, how many people currently have XenApp and XenDesktop deployed in their data centers? Keep your hand up if you're on the latest version, which is 7.18. It's one hand, that's good, or a couple hands there. This is the value that Citrix Cloud brings. With Citrix Cloud, we host the backend, we maintain it, we keep it up to date, we effectively deliver an evergreen service so you don't have to upgrade it. And let me take you through a brief video on how that transition would work to take your XenApp and XenDesktop environment and deploy it in Citrix Cloud.
More and more companies are becoming familiar with Citrix Cloud to help with their cloud strategy. As you may already know, Citrix Cloud takes over many components such as License Server, Director, Studio, Delivery Controller, Smart Tools, Storefront, Gateway, and SQL. Now, we take care of the management and upgrading and high availability. Next, you place the Cloud connector and connect with Active Directory. Citrix Cloud can now run your on-prem workloads, the server VDAs, and the desktop VDAs. A second connector is placed for higher availability. But what happens if the internet connection fails? In such an event, the connector takes over the role as control plane and the site database becomes the main database. Everyone who's logged on in the on-prem environment can continue to work. But what about the workloads we are moving more and more to the public cloud, such as Azure, AWS, or Google? And what about all the SaaS applications more and more people are depending on? To make these services from the cloud high available at the main office and branch offices, we simply add all available connections, such as 3G, 4G, satellite, MPLS, and DSL. Now, all workloads and services are always on when you need them, thanks to NetScaler SD-WAN.
And so Citrix Cloud is an ideal place to move your on-premise XenApp and XenDesktop environment. What Citrix Cloud also gives you is the most choice and flexibility around where you host those workloads. We support a multitude of clouds, both Azure and AWS, as well as Google and Oracle Cloud as well. But we also support all the underlying hypervisors as well that are deployed in your data center, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, Xen Server, and also hyperconverged vendors like Nutanix. So aside from XenApp and XenDesktop, there's a lot of people, as we talked about, who are dealing with the rise of SaaS and web applications. And Citrix Cloud also makes an ideal starting point to start your journey on how you embrace that. Let me play another short video on SaaS and web.
Organizations are increasingly moving applications to the cloud. They like the speed, the scalability, and the economics of the public cloud. For example, Azure and AWS continuously offer new services. If you see a service that you like, you can easily go ahead and start using it. Adding new users is also very easy. You scale up the machine power you need, and you scale down when you don't need it. The best part is, you only pay for what you use. That's what we call cloud economics. These are very powerful promises why organizations want to move to the cloud. IT departments try to deliver on these promises. As a starting point, they analyze the workloads that currently run on-prem. Very often, applications such as ERP, supply chain management, and CRM are very difficult to lift and shift to the cloud. As a result, separate environments are created. The difficult applications are left on-prem, and the easier ones are shifted to the cloud. Now, you have multiple environments to manage, and the amount of work on-prem remains the same even though you've moved more than 50% of your apps to the cloud. Complexity has increased, and your cost levels have risen because you need more staff to manage this complexity. With Citrix Cloud, the situation becomes much simpler. From one control plane, you manage the applications that run on-prem and in the cloud. You don't have to hire additional employees. Now, IT can truly deliver on the promises made by the cloud.
And so to help people who are on that journey, you may have XenApp and XenDesktop deployed on-premise, but you're now starting to deal with that emerging growth of SaaS and web applications. I'm really pleased to announce a new Workspace license, Workspace Standard. Workspace Standard includes all of the core capabilities that you've seen today around SaaS and web applications, the Citrix Access Control Service, the Workspace Experience, as well as the analytics capability, all in one simple license. It also is wrapped around with our secured digital perimeter, ensuring the security and integrity of the way users are accessing those applications. But what it gives you is a single end-user experience. You've got access to that excellent workspace experience, where you've got an aggregated view of all of the applications. You've got the ability to embrace your SaaS and web applications, as well as continue to feed your virtual applications from XenApp and XenDesktop that's deployed on-premise into that new workspace as well. All the while, from an IT perspective, you've now been able to deliver a single sign-on experience to your web applications. You've got the ability to deliver web filtering and also have the analytics capabilities to have deep visibility on user behaviors and application usage as well. So that's definitely something that we're really excited about, helping you embrace those SaaS and web apps. We're going to change gears now and move to talking about hybrid multi-cloud, and for that I'll hand back over to Simon.
We did some work last year with IDC to really take the pulse of the state of the cloud. And the findings from that study were quite interesting. We see that nearly 3/4 of organizations have not just one cloud, but they have a hybrid cloud. They still have infrastructure sitting in data centers. PJ's gazed into his crystal ball this morning and shared his insights with that. I think we can all agree very few organizations are going to ever reach the point where they can fully move off their legacy applications that are stuck in a data center, although all new things will tend to move into the cloud. But it's not just even one cloud. Most organizations are grappling with multiple clouds, and even the best laid plans of saying we are going to be entirely AWS or we're entirely Azure or Google, they get foiled at the very next acquisition or merger because the other company has a bunch of assets in another cloud. And the challenge that we're seeing here is that more than 3/4 of organizations who've embraced the cloud with the intent of getting all of this wonderful additional agility and flexibility and elasticity, they're now hamstrung because they're finding that the network architecture and this multi-cloud monstrosity they now have is undermining their ability to move to SaaS and move more workloads to the cloud. Essentially, they've created a whole lot of complexity that's undermined the entire initiative. Now, the consequences of a hybrid multi-cloud architecture tend to be felt across 3 dimensions. From the end user perspective, End users now have to struggle with remembering multiple sets of credentials for different SaaS providers or applications and so on. They have this fragmented user experience. Sometimes they have to use multiple factor authentication, sometimes they don't, sometimes they go to this URL, sometimes they go to that URL, they use this device, this app. So it's a fragmented user experience, it's inconsistent and not intuitive. Business leaders have a different perspective. Business leaders are struggling with the challenge now of governance and risk. How do I even know what data resides where, let alone who accesses it? How can I maintain any sort of oversight to ensure that the right people and only the right people are accessing data when I can't even tell where that data lives anymore? And then for the IT operations folks, we've got this real headache that even though cloud seems to be fairly ubiquitous and generic, how you do something in one cloud is often quite different from how you do it in another cloud. Each cloud has its own proprietary APIs, and each function, even though they perform similar tasks, will work subtly differently in each different cloud. So I then end up with this lock-in with a specific cloud. If I move an application to the cloud, I tie that to the API for that cloud, and it becomes a major project if I ever want to move it from that cloud to another cloud. Same thing with all of the tools for visualizing what's going on. I have a different set of analytics tools for each different cloud, and I can't have this single pane of glass view that I can see neatly what all of my environment is doing and how all of the infrastructure that supports a single application comes together and performs and contributes to that. To make hybrid multi-cloud architecture actually work for you, we essentially need a central brain. We need a central brain that's able to look deeply into each of the different cloud and on-prem environments and to analyze exactly what's going on with the infrastructure, to keep track of where all of the assets, the licenses, the virtual appliances and so on reside, to be able to keep track of what elements of the infrastructure are supporting which parts of the application, and to be able to simplify the portability and the control over different parts of the application and different applications. The ability that if we end up in a situation with some contestability and price arbitrage, I can now move my application to a better cloud service to get better economies of scale or to get better cost efficiency or better performance for that application. But today I can't do that because of the lock-in with specific APIs. So to create this central brain, I'd like to introduce you to our approach to hybrid multi-cloud.
James has the task to deliver all core enterprise apps from the cloud without being locked down to a single vendor, but he isn't sure how to do that. His current application delivery architecture is all around the ADC, which happens to be NetScaler. He decides to explore the Citrix Hybrid Cloud Application Delivery Solution, which acts like a central brain and can deliver applications hosted in a combination of on-prem, public, and private cloud environments. It can also distribute the load to each location. It can enable features like auto-scaling based on traffic volume and cloud bursting, that is, enabling traffic to additional locations as needed in order to handle a surge in demand. It also handles cloud failover and disaster recovery in the event of an outage, all while ensuring that each client goes to their geographically designated nearest location for the best experience. The central brain can authenticate users with an on-prem Active Directory server and distribute traffic across clouds using cookies to provide authentication for application-specific access. It takes care of expanding requirements with auto-provisioning of resources. Licensing is centralized and controlled and is based on subscription and consumption. Through the solution, James can manage his on-prem, public, and private cloud inventory through a single dashboard, and his SSL certificates can also be managed centrally for each location in the cloud. Connecting to enterprise stacks like Cisco ACI, VMware NSX, OpenStack, and Google Kubernetes, orchestration is simplified with this integrated solution. It also automates deployments with CloudFormation templates in AWS and Terraform templates for multiple device stacks. Stylebooks and modules for Ansible can be used for automating tasks. The central brain also works with external third-party solutions like Servicenow and SSL Labs. Finally, this brain is the one-stop analytics solution helping James to oversee the complete infrastructure and the applications delivered with it. It also helps to forecast the need for deployment changes by automating calculation tasks, such as when the infrastructure should scale up to handle peak demand, when the common peak usage time is for an application, when a certain deployment or application can be taken offline or failed over for maintenance, and when a particular server is slowing down, showing James how to and when to take it out of the production workflow.
As you can see, a lot of the ongoing enhancement to our application delivery and control portfolio is going into deeper integration with the various public cloud services so that things become easier for operators in terms of enabling elastic scaling of the front end or the back end and providing that one-click portability to migrate an application from one location to another. So the other challenge here though is visibility. How do I, if I'm running an application and there's parts of that application that is distributed perhaps between a data center and a cloud location or between multiple clouds or multiple availability zones across multiple clouds, how do I actually keep track of which of those locations is delivering the best performance? Which of those locations is the most cost-effective location for servicing my users? And as I mentioned before, today IT operations is generally stuck with a bunch of different tools that are looking at a fragmented view of different parts of the application. So our approach here is to bring this all together and have a holistic view that shows us what is the health of all of the infrastructure across all of the locations, but in an application-centric way. So if I look at a given application, which parts of that application are performing well, which parts of the infrastructure supporting it are contributing to performance issues. And from a security perspective, monitoring to ensure that all of the configuration of the infrastructure behind that application is consistent with the approved hardened security configurations, and be able to detect when we have either attacks against that environment or when we have situations like certificates that are about to expire and therefore make the application unavailable to the users. So let's take a look at our analytics for hybrid cloud.
So you're moving workloads to the cloud. That's great in so many ways. Except now you've got traffic spread out over AWS, Azure, on-premise apps, and if you can't keep track of it all, that's a problem. That's where Citrix NetScaler Management and Analytics System comes in. NetScaler MAS gives you full visibility into your apps all across your hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure. It's available as a software product or as a cloud service from Citrix, and it provides centralized management and analytics for faster troubleshooting and better performance. So wherever your workloads and data are, you can get a global view and drill down to view details about instances and events. Infrastructure is tied to apps, so that once an app is deployed, you can use the performance dashboard to see use and performance of the app, and drill down further for details. And use the App Security Dashboard to see threat index and total violations, and drill down into a specific app to see attacks and vulnerabilities. Use the configuration templates in our stylebooks to deploy your multi-cloud apps and apply policies easily and consistently. And manage all your security certificates from an intuitive dashboard. You even have the ability to share visibility and control securely with other teams like developers or your security team. And these are just a few of the ways, as you move to the cloud, that NetScaler MAS helps you maintain visibility and control. It's easy to adopt and very cost-effective. So start a free trial today and find out for yourself. Citrix NetScaler MAS.
One of the workloads that's driving the increase in cloud adoption is new applications, and especially new applications that are used for your organizations to engage your own customers. those of you who came up through the 90s and 2000s probably recognize the three-tier web application architecture on the left of the screen. This is how we've been designing and building browser-based applications since the browser began. We have the top tier, a bunch of web servers. Behind that is a layer of middleware or business logic servers. And then at the back end, we have the databases that support that. So classic three-tier architecture, and the architecture is robust and it's proven and it's scalable. Beautiful thing about it, we put more users on the system, we simply scale out horizontally, add more at whichever layer we need. The shortcoming of this architecture is that the application exists as a single monolithic piece of code, and if we need to make a change to correct a bug or to add capabilities to that application, we need to take the entire application offline to do so, have a fully scheduled change window during which the application is unavailable to the users. Now, if we're only pushing a change once a year, twice a year, this is no big deal. But consumers now expect applications to be always on. And the developers have shifted to agile development methodologies where they want to push small changes many, many times a day, to the point where we're now getting to hundreds or thousands of changes being pushed in an environment every single day. And we simply can't do that with this traditional application architecture. So organizations like Netflix, which have been at the forefront of defining new application architectures, have adopted what's known as microservices architecture. A microservices architecture works a little bit differently. Instead of having one big monolithic code base that we then replicate horizontally across a bunch of different servers, we break every function of that application out into its own standalone instance, and that instance runs in a container. So quick show of hands, who's heard of the term Docker and Kubernetes? All right, most of the room, fantastic. These technologies have exploded in the last 18 months because, firstly, Docker provides that platform for allowing the containers to spin up. Containerization is literally a very small scale form of virtualization. Every function of an application spins up in its own container on demand. So we have a platform like Kubernetes, which is keeping track of all of those containers and monitoring the demand, so that if we have a surge in demand for the login function of the application, it's spinning up dozens and dozens of additional instances of the login function in little containers. And then when the surge passes, and we no longer have so much demand for those login instances, it simply destroys them. And the average container lifespan for microservices applications today is measured in seconds. So we have a very rapidly changing environment with containers spinning up and spinning down second by second with individual functions of the application. When a developer wants to push a change to one of those functions or deploy a new function, they simply allow they throw this new code into the application, and when new instances spin up, they spin up based on the new code. And because each instance is only alive for a few seconds at a time, we can seamlessly go from the old version of code to the new version of code without disrupting the user experience along the way. So this is great. This gives us a level of agility we've never had before. We can now do continuous integration, continuous deployment. We can be running our applications 24/7 and pushing changes all the time to those applications. We can scale it any way we need to. And applications like Netflix have scaled to the point where they now look like this. This is called the Netflix Deathstar. What that shows you is a representation of all of the different instances within that application, the different functions, and the communication that occurs between those containers. And what's happening there is we have an enormous amount of complexity of communication between containers. And those containers are constantly changing. This is a snapshot in time. Over seconds, you'll see it morphs into something completely different. This creates a problem for those of us who care about monitoring user experience, monitoring security, monitoring protection of those applications. All of a sudden, this is now happening no longer over the network wires, but within networking between containers that's running through CPUs and memory. We've lost visibility, we've lost control. Now, this is fueling what I term developer-led shadow IT. It's creating a problem for organizations because developers care about pushing new features, developing code, pushing their releases out. They don't really care so much about security and governance. They don't have the experience generally in running and managing and maintaining applications at scale in an enterprise environment and enforcing all of the security protections that corporate security requires us to do. So they also don't like waiting for changes to be pushed. They don't like waiting on IT operations just to give them some load balancers or to spin up some new configuration. They just want to do it in real time on their MacBook because they can run an entire data center in Docker on their MacBook and it costs nothing. And because it costs nothing, they don't need to ask permission to do this. They simply download open source software, community editions like Docker, Kubernetes, and various other pieces of open source software to deliver the functions they need in their environment. They encounter challenges. How do we scale up the traffic within these instances? Easy. We need some load balancing functions. How do we get load balancing functions? Well, we download it from an open source repository. Now, any of you who follow the InfoSec news would have seen over the past few months there's been quite a significant increase in the number of attacks against open source projects, specifically the popular open source projects that get consumed by developers and embedded into applications that are then published in corporate environments. What the attackers are doing is they've realized if they can attack a project that's stored up on GitHub, if they can infect that repository with a few lines of code that gives them a backdoor into every application that consumes that code, then that's the easy way into all of your organizations. Your developers are not doing security audits on tens of thousands of lines of code that they're pulling from open source repositories. They're simply saying, yeah, this is a popular project, I trust it, I'm going to use it. And they then embed it in the application and create this backdoor. So this is called a software supply chain vulnerability. And the good news is that you can prevent it. Most of you in this room have NetScalers in your environment. The same software that is NetScaler is available inside a Docker container. It's available for free inside a Docker container to run in development environments, and the developers can help themselves to it. Not only that, they don't need to learn how to drive the NetScaler the way you probably drive the NetScaler through the Management Analytics service and through the GUI and so on. They can just plug it straight into their automation tools, their Ansibles or the other tools that they're using to automate their development and deployment processes. And they get all of that capability for ensuring high availability, high performance, high visibility, and high security for these new microservices applications built in containers and Kubernetes and so on. And they get it with a platform that your security team has already blessed, and a platform that we maintain as a security-based appliance that is going into organizations like eBay to keep their environment secure. And because we have to protect those customers, it's going to protect you as well. So let me introduce you to ADC for developers.
Let's say you're an IT network operations manager. You've got developers and DevOps teams who want to push their apps into production several times per month or even per day. So they need application delivery resources that will give them speed and flexibility and will integrate seamlessly with their other network tools and platforms like Kubernetes and Docker. But they're hesitant to work with IT. If IT is going to slow them down, they'd rather go it alone, which would be a mistake because you can now give them all the speed and flexibility they need with Citrix NetScaler for virtual machine or Docker container deployments, while you implement policies and maintain control. Using NetScaler Management and Analytics, or MAS, you can give your development team full access to their own NetScaler resources, so they can control their app even when the infrastructure is shared across many applications, and configure their virtual IP addresses, VIPs, using MAS stylebooks. When your developer logs in, they navigate to the stylebook to configure their VIPs. They select the NetScalers available for their use, and the stylebook does all the heavy lifting in the background. They can even track their app's performance to see usage, for instance, and troubleshoot issues. They can do all this through MAS, working through Ansible, Terraform, and other tools, or use these same tools to automate NetScaler directly. So they have everything they need to ensure high app performance and create a good user experience without having to open a trouble ticket or wait on IT. And meanwhile, your IT ops team maintains a central view into all app usage across your organization's hybrid multi-cloud deployment, with better security and scalability. And with pool capacity licensing, it's more affordable than ever. Find out more about Citrix NetScaler and start a free trial today.
A lot of the applications that these developers are building are actually for digital engagement of your customers. So they're building the online banking apps, or the service dashboards, or booking systems, or whatever it may be, however it is that you interact with your customers. So a quick show of hands, how many of you in your organization have applications that you publish, whether you host it on a website or you publish it as an app for mobile devices, that you use to interact with your customers? About a quarter of the room. So everything we've talked about today has really focused on improving the user experience for our internal users. But what about those external users? What about the guys who are consuming the applications you're publishing? And what we have in common between all of these different application scenarios is that users who are out on the internet consuming these applications, we can't predict where they're coming from. We can't predict how much traffic congestion there's going to be between our servers or our content delivery networks and that particular user. So we have acquired a company. We acquired this company back around December or January this year called Citrix. And Citrix operates a massive network of sensors, billions of sensors all over the internet. And all of these sensors are continually tracking what is the current state of congestion all over the globe. And when a user wants to use an application, we're able to determine what is the best path across the internet to deliver that application. Which content delivery network should we connect them to? Or which data center should we connect them to? And this way we're able to ensure the best possible user experience for the consumers of mobile applications and of streaming content. Let's take a look at how it works.
Does this sound familiar? You don't want your users waiting hours before accessing your website, because this makes your business lose credibility and money. At Citrix, we are working on building a faster web for everyone. Imagine that the internet is made of billions of roads, leading your users to the content they are looking for. Question is, how can you help them find the fastest and safest roads for the overcrowded internet traffic? We have the answer. Citrix connects your app and website visitors to the largest community of users working together to improve the internet. Like your car's nav, Citrix automatically detects when a community member suffers traffic congestion, gets blocked in a dead end, or finds a shortcut, and helps each of your users find the best path. Wherever they are, whenever they connect, whatever device they may use, we always make sure that your content is never more than a few milliseconds away from them. It's as simple as this. You want to be part of the community? Sign up at citrix.com and get started.
I suspect there may be some soccer fans in the room. And I can tell you that the countries where we were using Citrix didn't have the same streaming problems that we had in Australia. So something for us to work on for next year. We've covered an enormous amount of content today. We've touched on so many new offerings and use cases, and some you probably never even thought that Citrix would be talking about. If there's anything you'd like some more detail on, please do make a note of it on those evaluation forms, and we will definitely be following up with you as soon as we can. So to tell us about how we go through the next steps from all we've learned today, let me bring Safi back to the stage.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. So I think, as Simon said, we've definitely covered a lot of broad topics. We've talked about new announcements, new products, and new capabilities that we've brought to the market. And as I said, we focus on these 4 challenges that we believe most organizations are dealing with. SaaS and web apps, hybrid multi-cloud, automation, and maximizing that end user experience. And you know, those commitments that we talked about, that PJ talked about from a synergy perspective, it's actually an enormous list. And you can see that up there, that we've touched on all of these different new capabilities, new products, and new enhancements that we've made to our existing portfolio. One of the things that we've done to help you get started, you know, and hopefully what you've heard, or some of what you've heard, is relevant and of interest. So we've actually designed a number of free 2 to 4 hour workshops where we'll come in with you and consult with you on a number of these 3 themes. 1, help you review your delivery architecture for SaaS and web applications. 2, look at your delivery architecture around visibility, automation, and orchestration of your hybrid multi-cloud environments. And 3, really sit down with you and understand the different personas that exist within your organization and talk to you about your digital workspace needs. And so all these 3 workshops are marked on the evaluation forms. So if you do want to go forward with them, certainly tick them and drop them back in the forms on your desk. It's just a couple of final things. We continue to participate in a number of different events. If you are going to be at the Gartner Security Summit in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have a booth there talking about a lot more in depth about what we're doing from a security and networking perspective. We're actually doing more and more work with SAP as well. You know, as SAP are moving their back-end workloads into Azure, and also looking at delivering a more SaaS-based and mobile experience. There's a lot of work that we're doing together there, and we're actually participating in a number of user experience workshops that SAP is holding throughout October. We continue to do our user groups, and here in Melbourne, you have a Citrix user group community that's defined. I think Craig Stones is there at the back. He's one of the members of that. So if you are looking to collaborate and meet a lot of the broader elements of your technical community here, you've got that opportunity. And the final thing I just also wanted to talk about is Citrix Synergy. You know, we talked about the event next year. It's on the 21st and 23rd of May. There will be discount pricing that will be coming out in a couple of months' time. So I definitely recommend that you make plans to attend that. And so with that, I really want to thank you all for your time. I know it's been we've gone a little bit over in terms of time, but you know, I hope you've got a lot of value out of today. You know, as you can see, the workplace is changing. You know, everything we're seeing from the data points we got from the survey to the conversations we're having with both customers and partners is that, you know, the future isn't far away, it's here right now. And hopefully from what you've seen, you know, a lot of the new advanced innovations that we've made, the new products and services can help you see that, you know, Citrix is here to help you power that future of work. Thank you for your time and have a good day today. Thanks.